Hey, it's Lit with Lit Tower Strength Training here. I'm going to dive into how do I know that I've adapted to the exercise that I'm doing, because a lot of times when we look at applying a stimulus, making progress in training, what we're really trying to do is drive a stimulus and drive an adaptation that's going to elicit an effect that is going to help us perform a certain task, play a certain sport, or move forward towards some type of fitness goal. Okay, now we have a couple different adaptations that we can really look at, right, that are really common. Power is an adaptation, the ability to move weight across a varied distance. So light weights fast, moderate weights kind of fast, and heavy weights pretty forcefully. Then we start to look at stuff like speed, just the total amount of speed that we can produce. Weight loss, that's an adaptation. Hypertrophy, that's an adaptation. One of the things that we run into a lot of times is people will change their exercises far too soon and before they ever actually adapt to them. All right. Now, one of the common things that a lot of people do is when they plan out a training plan, they make a fourth week a deload week. This isn't actually super scientific. It's just easy when we plan it out to say we're going to do 3 weeks and then we're going to take a deload week, and we're going to take 3 weeks and we have a deload week. The problem with that is that 4 weeks isn't necessarily a biological rhythm. Okay. I've got a certain level of biology. You have a certain level of biology. And the way that we adapt to training is going to be set by a couple different markers. First one we're going to really talk about, and this one is just a total level of fatigue. Okay. You notice this in how you cognitively think. You get a little bit of brain fog. We get a little bit of increased soreness, and we look at performance actually starting to decrease. So if you look at a standard adaptation curve, you have time, okay, and you have performance on a y-axis. And so what happens is you introduce a shock, you decrease in performance because your body is in shock mode. But as you start to adapt, you come up and go over time. We've done a video about this in the past, kind of showing you how you adapt. But the thing that when we look at is, how do I know that I've adapted? We start to see performance go up, and at a certain point, you've exhausted the adaptation, and so you start to go down. You'll start to notice performance decreases. Again, you'll start to see an increase in soreness. You'll see you move a little slower. You'll see brain fog. So that's how we start to notice adaptation from a just general perception level. When we start to look at other signs, you're going to start to notice a couple other things. This one is actually a little bit grosser, but if I could ask the number of athletes that I've worked with at some point, how is your bathroom use regularity? What you end up seeing when you're really close to adapting, or you're at a certain point where your body is making those adaptations, you get to a point where you might have increased diarrhea. You might go to the bathroom more frequently. You're urinating more. You're having irregular bowel movements, or you're more gassy. Those things, because what happens is that your cells start to break down and they start to go through that adaptation process. And so they create waste. As they adapt, they create waste products. And so what happens to it? It's excreted through your poop and your pee. So then we start to look at, say, all right, if I can go through a certain level of adaptation, I know that I'm adapting. If all of a sudden I start to see irregular bowel movements, so all of a sudden I can move through regularity, I'm starting to eat more, all of a sudden you go through those bowel movements, and then they start to clear back up and get more normal. At that point is when you are probably also going to see that fatigue start to set in. So if I can go through and see that fatigue, the thing that's going to help me move forward is starting to change my exercises again. Okay? So that's about one factor. The next thing you're going to see, and this is where people talk about like CNS fatigue. We talked a little bit about the general fatigue, but sometimes you'll start to feel really, really good, but your performance still starts to decrease. I'm going to have a great little video here. If you watch this little video, you'll see the amount of shaking that's happening just in holding a bar at end range of a hamstring tension. What's happening in that video that you're watching right here is that the total amount of muscle fibers being able to be recruited by the nervous system is struggling to maintain its contraction because the nervous system just can't send that much signal. So when we start to look at that fatigue level, you'll start to notice things like increased tone in the muscle tissue. You'll notice maybe some soreness around tendons and specific joints that you're using. It's all part of that adaptation process. And what happens is a lot of times, and this is why we're talking about this in a video here, a lot of times people will follow a standard 3 weeks on and then do a deload week, and they'll do 3 weeks and they'll do a deload week. What happens if you do that, though, is that you can go through that adaptation process, you see your performance decrease, you start to come up, but before you ever actually get to that full potential, you cut it short and you introduce a new shock. So all of a sudden you're limiting your potential over time. What we need to do then is take that the workouts you're doing, take that training stimulus, and we need to apply it as long as we can until we've exhausted the benefits. So we need to run into those moments of, we need to hit fatigue levels. We need to hit moments maybe where your bowel irregularities are starting to be prevalent, and just go a little bit beyond that. We need to get to a point where you might find yourself a little bit more beat up and a little bit more sore and having that performance decrease before we change stuff. Too many times people will change stuff before they actually get to any of those points. And while it's decent in terms of still being able to make slight progress over time, you never actually realize the full potential and the full gains that you could from your training. So as you plan out your training, don't just jump to a deload week because it's the 4th week in a month. Don't just move forward into new stimulus because you might not have realized those full gains and actually gotten the full adaptation that you could have. I know some people, 3 weeks, they're good. Some people 5. I've had clients and athletes I've worked with 10 weeks, right? Stay the course, be able to move forward in those training sessions, keep applying the same stimulus until you've gotten to a point where your body gives you those signs that you've adapted and that you've moved in the right direction. Then you can change your stimulus, reapply a new stimulus, and that's what's going to end up helping move you forward in your fitness, health, and performance.